Good afternoon, and thank you so very much for attending our webinar today. I think you're really in for a treat. We're talking about recruiting caregivers and why your brand matters when recruiting caregivers, because you have to have a variety of ways to attract them. So my name is Marilee Orsini, and I am President and CEO of corecubed, which is a marketing company. And we have as our guest today Maggie Keene. But before I get into to her presentation, let me do a couple of housekeeping things. First is that we are recording this session, so and we have everyone on mute mode. So because we have everyone on mute mode, it means we cannot hear you and we won't have some distractions. So if you have questions, however, please go to the right-hand side of your screen, and there is a place for you to input questions. And so we would welcome your doing that. And so we will, let's move through our presentation. Maggie, you want to just do a quick slide of a quick shot of, this is some information about me, not that you really need to know that much about me, just the fact that we are dedicated to the industry. We've been in the industry, I've personally been in the industry now for 36 years, and I'm dedicated to helping the industry grow and survive, and help all the agencies be profitable and maximize their their dollars spent. So we're on the marketing side of it, the branding side, the communication side, but across the country. And I do travel around the country a lot. I speak and talk to people around the country, and the biggest issue that everyone has is caregiver recruitment. So that's why we have Maggie Keene here today. And Maggie is with myCNAjobs, and you can reach their website at myCNAjobs.com, but she is the Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships. Prior to myCNAjobs, she had her own business and saw a need in this industry, and based on the results that our clients have around the country, Maggie, you are doing a fabulous job. So we are so excited for you to be here today, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to you and let you just run with it.
Wonderful, Miss Marilee. Well, thank you so much. Miss Marilee was up here in Chicago just yesterday, so got her home safely. So wonderful. I appreciate you inviting myself and myCNAjobs as a whole here to join your team in this important conversation. So Marilee's right. I previously owned my own business, but have been with the myCNAjobs team here, and much like Marilee, travel across the country as well, speaking on topics of caregiver recruitment and retention. So there's a lot of you on the line here today, some more people joining us here as we speak here. But our goal as a mission-driven business is to arm healthcare recruiters, like many of you on the line, and owners, with more insight about caregiver motivations to really fuel your hiring and retention here. So I'm really pleased to be here to talk about what I think is likely one of the hardest parts of your job and hardest parts of growing your business is here today, which is recruiting and retaining caregivers. The good thing is you're not alone. The bad thing is I'm not here today to deliver a silver bullet. Unfortunately, I don't think that exists. It's a gnarly market problem that we're seeing everyone in this space is challenged by. However, I am here to talk to you about the latest trends, what we're seeing innovators doing in this space, bring you the perspective of a caregiver, and then share some best practices that we've seen in the industry that are easy to take back today, implement in your own company, things you can do to really grow your business. We often hear time and time again that for many companies, this element of recruiting your frontline workers tends to be the single biggest limiting factor to your business growth. And every day, we see thousands of candidates coming to our site, and we work with companies like you battling it out across the country to get the best talent. So it puts us in a unique point of view in the landscape, and I'm going to bring you that insight here today. So here's what we have in store for you. We're going to start by sharing some insights on the market from both an industry standpoint as well as a caregiver's perspective. And we research and reach thousands of caregivers every year. We talk to them in surveys. We have caregivers coming to our site. We talk to them over the phone. We get insight and learning on their perspective, which we think is a key part of the puzzle, the recruitment puzzle here, when we look at the right strategies to attract and retain our talent. Then we're going to roll up our sleeves, go deep on recruitment, talk about some trends and best practices, and we'll close out our conversation here today with some new recruitment solutions and ways you can think outside the box. So let's dive in. We'll start with the market. So this is the actual cover of our latest caregiver trend report. It's about the caregiver crisis, which we've all read about, we've all talked about. It's a phrase you hear commonly in our industry, but the moral of the story, it's not coming anymore, it's here. Caregiver recruitment is getting more challenging, and it's getting even harder given our mission. We don't just want to hire anyone, right? You want to hire someone that has a passion and a heart for helping our seniors, has a servant mentality, and this is even harder given our mission. And so recruiting today, we all know on the line here, is harder today than it was a year ago. And unfortunately, if we're all sitting on the line here in 12 months, it will get even harder. But it is an honor to be here today, and I commend those of you who are joining us today as well. The companies that are putting plans in place today to weather this storm and to address these hiring challenges are a step ahead of your competition. So let's kick it off by talking about the big picture here. So no one has better insight than our friends at AARP. So they just published a study indicating that 117 million Americans are expected to need care by 2020. That's a big number. Now look at these two smaller numbers. So it's forecasted that there will be 45 million unpaid caregivers. Those are family members, friends, children, right? So let's all go home and hug our children and our family. It will also be forecast that there will only be 5 million paid caregivers, which is a crazy low number when you think about that 117 million that need care. So it's also forecasted, if you walk through all of this, there's a massive deficit here, right? About 67 million people that need care and don't have anyone to care for them. So what does that mean? It means that we're going to need to create caregivers. There's not enough people coming into our profession. And I think we're going to need to create caregivers and get creative from different sectors. So when we look at what industries caregivers are coming from today, 22% of them are coming from retail and 15% from fast food. And although it's great that we're drawing people in from those categories, the challenge is this whole concept of, is the grass greener? So a lot of folks entering through those channels are higher turn employees. They get into the business thinking it's a better path, but often they're learning they maybe don't have the heart for it, or it's easier to get the hours or the income they want in those retail and fast food jobs, right, that they've been coming from. So it tends to be a higher churn group. And when we look at how employment's changed from a caregiver's perspective in the last year, here's what they said. So 36% said, I'm making more money than I was a year ago. 46% say they're getting more job offers, and 42% say they're working more hours. So those are interesting stats, interesting insights, but what I really think is unique over here is that on average, caregivers receive at least 3 calls for other jobs each week. So this means that the candidates that you're trying to recruit today, along with the candidates and caregivers that are working for you today, are getting calls on average from 3 of your competitors every week. That's high, that's a big number, and that's a national average. So a lot of the numbers we'll talk about here are not necessarily market specific, but there's some markets in the U.S., Chicago being one of them. Actually, it's one of the most competitive markets here in the U.S. in terms of density for candidate and caregiver recruitment. They're getting more like 8, 9, 10 calls every week for work. So that number is alarming. Now, we also see wages rising in the industry. So we work with companies across the senior care and the healthcare continuum, from individual home care agencies to large senior living organizations to hospitals and health systems. And we see across the industry that wages are rising. Companies come to us daily now asking what other companies are doing in their area, what they're offering, what they're putting in their job content. 2 years ago, we needed to encourage companies to put a single benefit in their jobs and recruiting materials. Now it's a laundry list, a sea of benefits, just trying to stay competitive. So more companies are coming to us today trying to get advice on how to get more applicants, how to get more caregivers showing up for their interviews, getting more caregivers to choose their business. So this is something we're seeing every day, and it's been a big changing of the tide in the last 2 years. So there's new models, more specifically in the home care space. I'll touch on one of them here in a minute, that are emerging. And with that comes new entrants and new players in the market in general. The good part is it's creating more awareness for the industry. So historically, home care in particular is something that people may not have been as familiar with, but will undoubtedly spark more growth and demand here. What's new here is your worries are shifting. So home care companies historically used to worry about other companies taking their clients, right? When we look at senior living and home care now, you need to worry about who's going to take your caregivers. So it's important to understand these new entrants, as the challenge is going to be staying competitive given the market that we're in. One of the biggest challenges is that wages are low in the industry. It's one of the biggest reasons that people leave and maybe return to that retail or that fast food job. And we see new entrants pushing the bar here. So here are some averages, average wages, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics for home health aides and nursing aides. So you can see for your average home health aide wage, it's ranging from $8.40 on the low end. That median there is about $10.54. We do have some people paying over $14 an hour. For nursing assistants, those CNAs, it's $9.32, a little bit higher on the low end, and $12.36 there for that median. But we do see companies paying more than $17, $20 an hour as well. So something to consider. This is on the upswing. Now, I want to talk very briefly about one new model making some waves in the space, specifically in home care, and it's Honor. And some of you on the line, I'm sure, have heard of them before. I put a few things on the screen here from their site that I thought were interesting to study and understand. So I think they're unique from a branding perspective, and we'll talk about this here in a second. But their homepage says, their main page says, "Are you an amazing caregiver? Join us. We're hiring in California, Texas, New Mexico. We employ the best caregivers, and we treat them better than any other home care agency." So Honor as a model has evolved and shifted significantly in the last year or two, but fundamentally what I think is unique about them is they're making that statement. They're focusing their marketing, they're focusing their brand around caregivers. They get that they need to treat their caregivers well. And unfortunately, a lot of companies don't do this. Do this every day. We hear it from caregivers. When it was easy to get those candidates, it kind of took a back seat. Some companies still, unfortunately, have not drank the Kool-Aid that they are the heart of the business. And this is a player in the space that gets that. So part of our conversation today, and one of the reasons that Marilee and the team at corecubed and I connected on this, is their team's fantastic at helping you manage and market your brand with your clients, right? Getting your name and your information and what you have to offer, what's unique about you and your brand out there to families or to potential clients or partners, right? And with myCNAjobs, and one of our big focuses is building that same brand, talking about that same marketing, but how are you doing that for caregivers, right? Because they have choices, which is a big thing that we're talking about here. And this is one of those choices they have in the industry. And companies who are coming out today, and there's more and more of these emerging, not just Honor, but coming out and putting the caregiver first and talking about them being the focus and the heart of their business. And unfortunately, many senior care companies that we work with today, they're not the heart of their business, and they're not what they're focused on in their marketing or their brand development. So something to pay attention to here as well. Now, we look at how important it is to be competitive from a compensation standpoint. This stat from one of our recent studies really stood out to me. So we asked caregivers, do you feel you can earn enough money with your current certification to continue working in the field? So skilled means somebody with a CNA or HHA license. Unskilled is a caregiver companion. 23% of skilled CNA caregivers said no, and 34% of those without a certification also said no. It's a big number in a market where we already don't have enough people. Here's what we also know in the industry. So some of you might be familiar with SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. It costs our businesses $3,500 to replace a single minimum wage employee. And this is a number that SHRM has out there. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how much time and money it costs to recruit somebody, but this is how much it costs to lose them. And it's a big number. Many of you are familiar or maybe familiar with a company we highly respect in the space, Home Care Pulse. So they survey thousands of agencies each year. This is a home care metric, not a senior care metric, but many companies in senior care, the number is actually higher than this. On average, there's a 63% turnover for caregivers in companies in home care that they surveyed. It's a massive number, and my guess is this will continue to be on the rise. I think in their latest survey, it may even have already gone up to 66% as well. So overall, the market's getting tighter. Caregivers are jumping companies. There's not enough new talent coming in. So something we can all do and fight for together is to make this career more attractive. And this is a must for survival. And what can you do as agency owners, recruiters, and executive directors on the line you can help keep these candidates in the industry by putting strategies in place to retain them. So that was the doom and gloom portion of our conversation today. But I do think it's important that we don't turn a blind eye to the very real challenges facing our local marketplaces, facing our local teams and companies. Primarily, again, I'm referencing national trends, and each market is going to have some unique challenges themselves. They may need to slightly tweak your business strategies or some of the insights that I'm sharing today based on your local market to hit your goals. But now I want to dive into some of the business strategies and what you can do about this. So we're going to talk specifically about recruitment, candidate attraction, and then scaling that recruitment as well. So how do you scale that mathematically to think about building and meeting your ongoing recruitment demands? So strategically, we all need to start thinking bigger than our current market. So we just talked about how it wasn't big enough. Got to do something about it. When I think about the market, I break it into 3 categories. So first is the current market. So these are those people today who are currently in the industry. They're the ones applying for your jobs. They self-identify as caregivers or CNAs. This is that group that you're already talking to, you're already reaching. So continuing to improve your reach here, continuing to improve your brand here as well, your offering. But the next portion that I look at here is a portion of the market that I think many companies ignore, and this is new grads. So we still work with companies that have a 2-year experience requirement. Unfortunately, less than 30% of the market has more than 2 years of experience. I think that bears repeating. So that means there's not enough caregivers. We know they all don't want to stay in the industry. And if we're talking about someone or requiring that someone has more than 2 years of experience, you're cutting your market down by 70+%. So many companies are no longer going to be able to do this. And I think fundamentally training is going to be key here. So taking a new grad that's in the business for the right reasons, excited about that new CNA or HHA license, right, has fire in the belly to get out and work. We need this segment of the market, and we need to arm them so they're successful out of the gates to take care of someone in their home or serve as part of a care management team at a senior living community as well. So we need this segment. And most, when I was just speaking in Miami last week, I asked a room of people who here in the room had relationships with their local CNA school, and it was less than half the people in the room. So this is still a relatively untapped group. I know a lot of people touch on this one. It's not one that I think a lot of companies are taking advantage of. And the third part here is everyone else. And I know that seems a little dramatic, but that's just intention. As an industry, if we don't start creating caregivers, attracting people in, we're all going to lose. So consider tapping into new talent types. Those could be new moms. This could be caregivers with familial experience, which is something we're seeing more and more of, who don't necessarily know about this as an ongoing career. Students who may not be going for nursing, right, may not be getting a CNA license, but this could make a great part-time job for them regardless. And looking at retirees and local community groups. We need to go deeper to reach more people. So one of my biggest recommendations is take a look at your requirements today. Revisit them. Ask if they still make sense. Are they nice to have, or are they a hard requirement? Can you grow your business by keeping them? Can you train caregivers to be better candidates? Can you attract people to you today that have not historically been knocking on your door? So this is a big focus for us at myCNAjobs, drawing people into a profession, and we invite you and welcome you to join us in that pursuit. Now, being competitive is the biggest best practice theme of our day-to-day. Caregivers have options. We've talked about that. So we ask caregivers, if you've got multiple job interviews and you only have time to go to one, what would be that defining factor that would make you choose one interview over another? Pay, no one's surprised. That was the biggest factor they looked at. But hours and scheduling one, best benefits, which is interesting. And these last two are ones that we see consistently. So work location closest to my house. This is obviously a little bit more unique and an ability for someone to do this more in the home care space, but still something that you can consider that commute time when you're working with caregivers and candidates you're trying to attract to your senior living community or your hospital or health system. And then companies with the best reputation. This is something we're seeing actually increasing. Caregivers, with the advent of having more and more options, right, they're considering here looking at which companies they think they'd like to tie themselves to, right, associate themselves to as well. So You don't necessarily have to win in all of these, but unfortunately, you also can't lose on enough of them either. So you need to be a leader somewhere on the board. You need to be able to speak to the other areas, or maybe you're not as strong. Shop your competitors to evaluate where you're landing, right, and help you to build your attraction strategy. So there's 3 ways to do this. A lot of you are shopping competitors today. On the client side, I encourage you to do that on the caregiver side as well. During every interview, which is a great chance to connect with those caregivers who are coming in as candidates, right? When you see that a candidate has worked for someone else in your area, ask them about it. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a direct competitor. It doesn't even have to be somebody in senior care. Anyone who's hired this person before you should be on your competitive map. Think about those other companies, those retail and fast food. What is it that they were offering or not offering, for example, that's making them want to come and work with you? So talk to those candidates in depth about what that company offered. Write it down, build a matrix. You can collect a lot of data really quickly that way. Another way to see where you're landing from a competitive standpoint is to shop your competitors. Ask questions, learn more, see what their process is for hiring, visit their websites, read their job descriptions. So try to get a feel for where you're similar and where you're different. And the last part here on the reputation piece, look who's earning more local awards, best place to work awards, things like that. Lots of senior care and local awards out there. Who's winning them and why? And take a look at this to see where you fall in comparison as well. Now, once you have that solid offering in place, which is fantastic, and talk about having that, how attractive that is to a candidate, you need to talk about scaling your recruitment. So what I'm going to talk about here for a couple of minutes is what that means and how you can do that by managing your cost per hire. So in my humble opinion, cost per hire is the metric that matters most. So today we're going to talk about cost per hire in terms of the cost to you to recruit one caregiver that starts working for you. So caregiver that accepts a case, builds their first hour, works their first shift. In a minute, I'll talk you through how to get to this number for your local office, your community. We have a tool that's free for you to use. You don't have to be a client of ours, where you could input some gut averages to kind of see where you're at to get that baseline for that cost per hire. But first, I want to talk about why this is important to understand. So I think this metric is important to help provide some clarity around where you're strong and where you're weak in your current recruiting efforts. So if you think through, sometimes and historically, companies come to us and they think they just need more resumes. They just need more people coming in the top of the funnel. Unfortunately, we're not growing caregivers here in Chicago, where there's not a limitless supply of candidates. And so it's not just about getting more people at the top of the funnel. It can also be about how do you increase your interview show-up rate? How do you get more people to show up to your orientations or increase the number of caregivers who are accepting cases with you as well? So your cost per hire is directly correlated to your recruitment metrics today. You need to understand your cost per hire today so that you can lower it. And in caregiver recruitment, I'm sure everybody on the line wants to get more hires at the lowest possible cost. You want that, competitor wants that, it's the holy grail. You can't get that low cost per hire unless you know what it is today. You can't focus on lowering it without a baseline. Understanding your cost per hire will also help you assess your recruitment partners, including us at myCNAjobs. So you should measure your recruitment partners. You should hold them accountable. But it's important to hold them accountable on something that's measurable and more of an apples-to-apples comparison. The last piece here is I think it's important to understand cost per hire to scale your recruitment. Here's what I mean by that. So scaling recruitment is all about maximizing your monthly hires across each of your recruitment channels to hit those monthly goals at the lowest possible cost per hire. So you have all those different channels you're using. How do you maximize the number of hires you can make from them at the lowest possible cost? So let's dive in. Each recruitment channel is going to net a different cost per hire. It's also going to net a different volume of hires that you can make on a monthly basis. This means that what you pay for a hire from a CNA school is likely different than what you might pay for a hire from a newspaper. Maybe you get more hires from that newspaper than you can get from your local school. So this means if you're using a tool like a myCNAjobs, you've got a bunch of different resources in there. And you may even have within a tool multiple channels. It costs something different to get caregivers from our resume and job boards than it does from our interview booking service, for example. So your cost per hire on each of these will be unique. And the number of hires that you can generate on each month, and pardon me, each channel each month is unique as well. So let me show you an example. So let's say your goal is to hire 12 to 14 caregivers a month, and this is to help you meet the demands of your business. There's 3 channels you use today that you found drive-in candidates you feel good about, right? Because it's not just about the numbers. We're trying to recruit folks that we feel good about are in the business for the right reasons. So you've got 3 channels. You have a CNA school, an online job board, and a local newspaper. The local CNA school has a pretty incredibly low cost per hire, $85. Maybe spend a couple hours a month, $100 for donuts, you get a few hires here. The online job board's a little bit higher, right? $342 there, their cost per hire, but you can get a lot more candidates. You can hire 9 candidates there, and you need to do that in order to hit that goal of 12 to 14. Now, that last local newspaper, you get a lot of hires. You can get, 10 hires a month from that, but it's a lot more expensive, and it's $483 per hire. So I'll walk you through that calc in just a minute, but now that you know what those calculations are, what those cost per hires, how many you can get and how much it costs you to get them, now you can sit down and say, how can I optimize around each of these channels? So if this is my business, this is what I would do. I try to get at least one more CNA or one more hire a month out of that school. Can't beat that low cost per hire. With the job board, I focus on lowering my cost per hire. So I need this job board to hit my goal. I can't just rely on the CNA school. So what do I need to do to lower that cost? So is that, do I need to call more people from that job board? Do I need to tweak my process in my office to get more people showing up for my interviews? What does that look like? And then the newspaper, I would truly only use this when I need it. So if I have a higher cost per hire here than any of my other channels, I'd stay away from it unless I need that volume. All right, so let's get into what it would mean to calculate your cost per hire. So when we look at cost per hire in the calculator that we built, it's important to understand cost per hire is going to vary based on your market. And there's quite a few companies on the line today in markets all across the country. None of you will likely have the same cost per hire. It's also going to vary based on your brand and your recruitment metrics. So those things we talked about. So how many people call you back, how many show up for your interview, those are unique to your offices. There's some general numbers across the country, but your office is going to have your own unique numbers and metrics there. So there's 3 parts to the calculation, and I'll show you here what the calculator looks like, and I'll show you the link to it twice. So that's coming up shortly. So first is this recruitment benchmark. So again, enter things in the calculator like how many caregivers show up for interviews, accept cases. You don't have to have exact numbers. If you have them, great, but your gut's okay here. Second is your recruitment goals. The calculator will plunk out how many resumes you need to hit your goals and how much time you need to spend recruiting to hit that goal. So you'll enter that info. And finally, you'll also enter in your recruitment spend. So we'll build in what you're spending today in both money and time so you can see the true cost of getting that candidate to the door. So here's one link, and I'll show you this slide again here in 3 more slides. So you don't have to be a client of myCNAjobs. We built this calculator for you to calculate your cost per hire. So if you write this down, www.myCNAjobs.com and then /CPH, it'll take you to a calculator. You can enter all this in, and it'll plunk out here a result, and I'll show you what that looks like. So I'll walk you through the 3 parts of the calculator, and then I'll show you again this link. So first section here, those benchmarks. So if you review 100 resumes, how many do you, and then contact, call back, right, down to the list here. So that's kind of that waterfall. And then at the bottom, it'll say how many hours would you say your office spends on sourcing candidates monthly. So you'll plug that number in. So you've got that baseline. The next 2 sections are around your goals. So where are you today? How many caregivers do you actually hire monthly? And how many would you like to be hiring on a monthly basis? So today your hires, where you want to be, and then your recruitment spend. So it builds in what you spend on different recruiting channels like job boards or other advertising, but it also builds in your time. So you build in how much time you spend sourcing alongside the salary or the wage of the person doing that, so the recruiter, or if it's someone else in your office, gives you a full picture of what your actual cost per hire is. And then it will give you this. So after you calculate your cost per hire, it provides you your cost per hire. So in this case, it's $361 alongside the national average. So the industry average, according to Home Care Pulse, is $330 to source and recruit 1 hire. It does not include things like background checks or drug screens. It varies so exponentially between states. So this is just getting somebody there, right? Recruiting, sourcing that candidate. You'll also see metrics on how many hours you need to spend to recruit to hit your goal. So say you look at 300 resumes and spend 120 hours. It'll tell you in there as well what your cost per hire is alongside your interview show-up rate and your booked interview to hire rate. So I think that's incredibly interesting. If you book 100 interviews, 13 will turn into a hire if a 13% booked interview here. So by knowing this, you can back into what your monthly goals should be, your weekly goals, even your daily goals for your recruiting and HR team. It's incredibly, incredibly useful. If you are a myCNAjobs customer and you're using us today, go ahead and complete this calculator inside of your account. We store this. You can work with your strategist over here and constantly be optimizing and tweaking this, and we can help you to lower that and provide some recommendations based on what we're seeing. There isn't a one-size-fits-all recruitment solution. Some companies make sense to use job board tools, others more automated tools like career fairs or interview booking. So again, it's building that out for you here. In case you didn't write it down, here it is again, myCNAjobs.com/CPH. Again, free to use. You don't have to be a client. If you are, go ahead and do it in your account with us. All right. So let's talk a little bit about spend. Although we're talking about recruitment, I think it's good to see recommendations for both what you should spend on marketing versus recruiting. I think how you get those numbers is a little bit different. So in home care, the median spend is about 2.5% of revenue. As the market gets more competitive, I think this will continue to go up. When we look at recruitment, once you know your cost per hire, we recommend setting a budget based on your hiring goals. And you can do this, do your hiring goals, multiplied by what that cost per hire is. So once you have that number, you're much more easily able to do that. It's important to keep in mind that your cost per hire is going to fluctuate. So you might be able to recruit your 5 first caregivers every month or right out of the gate relatively easily and maybe for next to nothing. But getting hires 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is going to cost you a lot more. And you need to get to understanding your cost per hire to help you hit your goals. This is the key. Now, what's important to think about is when I say adjusting, right, that spend up and down, it doesn't mean turning recruiting off. And this is something historically we're seeing less and less, but we used to see a lot more. We used to have companies who would say, you know, I'm not hiring right now, so I'm not going to recruit this month, or I don't think I need anybody in my pipeline, so I'm gonna stop recruiting for now. You must never turn recruitment off. I think most people on the line today probably know that. You should always have jobs. You should always be interviewing, keeping that pipeline, even if it's lighter than normal. If you don't do this, these are the companies that we see who are in trouble. So this is something we see every day. We've done a demo of our tools and signed somebody up on Christmas Day every year since we've been in business. Those are the people who leave us panicked voicemails on Sunday nights when we come in Monday morning. So this comes from a place of talking to those panic recruiters daily that have taken that reactive recruiting strategy, and unfortunately they're seeing their lunch getting taken by a competitor down the street. So moral of the story here, don't do that. Adjust your spend up and down based on your needs, based on your hiring needs, based on what metrics and what recruitment is telling you what's working well and what's not. So one of the things we want to focus on here is actually looking at how you can optimize in that. So cost per hire is great. It's good to understand that. It's good to have a baseline. It's something you can build on, and it's something that you can work to lower, right? And identify which channels work well for you. Unfortunately, there isn't, like I said, a limitless supply of caregivers. So one of the things you want to focus on, and one of the things I'm going to highlight here, are some insights and kind of tips that we see throughout that recruitment calculator, that benchmark section of the calculator, where if you're struggling in different areas there, where not everyone's strong all the way through. So if you're struggling at any point in there, this can really drive your cost per hire up. You get a lot of people in the front door, but then you can't turn them into hires at the bottom, your cost's going to go up. So think about where in that funnel you're losing people. So if you're struggling with low callback rates, and this is something that's a challenge, focusing here can help lower that cost. So the 3 best practices we recommend if you're struggling with getting people to call you back, first and foremost, you're going to hear me say this for the next couple of slides, is connect. So share your story. It's tough. Caregiver recruitment across the senior care continuum. Caregivers are getting all those calls every week for work. They're probably not calling everybody back. They're calling back the people that they think sound interested in them and interesting opportunities. Talk about your story as a business, why you all are in this business, and find a way to connect with that candidate beyond here's what I need, here's the shifts I need filled. recruit daily, so the early bird always gets the worm, and remember that if candidates are hearing from people multiple times a week. Call caregivers, don't email them anymore. Emails, sending out big bulk emails may have worked a couple years ago, it just doesn't anymore. Caregivers' inboxes are full of emails from companies just like you. So think about separating yourself from that noise. So going down the funnel, if you're struggling with caregivers, you get on the phone not taking an interest in your company or not being engaged, not only is that connection important to continue to find ways to make that caregiver feel special, but caregivers also report the connection they have with that recruiter in their first encounter is one of the biggest drivers in them wanting to take an interview with that company. So it plays a huge role who you have doing recruiting in your office and what their approach is to attracting candidates. Don't overscreen. This turns caregivers off. Instead, think about how can I build a relationship? So yes, you need to screen. Totally get that. Part of the process, and it's critical, but some companies go so in-depth here that they end up turning candidates off. So think about if you're over-screening and think through your process. Be critical of that today. And the last element here is get excited. Focus on the benefits to a caregiver, not just what you need. So think through if you don't have a list of benefits today, if you don't have kind of a sales pitch about what makes you different than the other agency or the other community down the street, something to think about here. So get excited, focus on the benefits to a candidate. If you're struggling with getting people to show up, again, that connection is important. Following up with them, being available, so interview often and throughout the day and the evening. If you're able to move throughout a territory, if you're a home care company, do that, interview where those caregivers are, and get them in within 72 hours of you talking to the candidate. If you're struggling to get people that you want to hire come pass your checks, screen the same day, set up testing in your offices, your communities, and go digital with your references. We've partnered with a company called Checkster. There's a lot of great companies out there, but let candidates know the next step in the process. And this is a big area where we see a lot of companies lose. They lose, get people all the way through this funnel, they're working their butts off to get them down here, and then they lose candidates because they can't process them quickly enough. So if we think about what that looks like, and that last piece here, showing up to orientation or actually accepting a case, keep that relationship alive. So we ask candidates, on average, how long does it take for you to start working after an interview? 20%, so 1 in 5 caregivers are at work in less than 24 hours. They're probably working for companies who aren't following all the rules. By no means are we suggesting that, but it's important to understand that there is a group of people out there who aren't playing by the rules. And so thinking about it taking a week or 2 weeks for someone to get on a shift, you're losing in that instance, right? So a third of caregivers are getting to work in 2 to 3 days. If it's taking you longer than that, that's half the market, right, is getting to work there in the first 3 days after they're in your interview. So important to think all the way through this funnel, areas where you can create some successes. These are easy wins to go back to your office. Think critically about that. This is a nice way to not just, or again, you can't just keep pouring people on the top of the funnel. It's important to think about where you can prevent them from falling out along the way. So I want to kind of close this section here. And one thing I really want to point out is it's not just about who you want to hire, right? Caregivers have to want to pick you too. So 44% of caregivers tell us they would turn down a job if they felt that interview went poorly, regardless of how much it paid or the benefits it offered or how close it was to their house. So it's important to make them feel welcome. It's important to offer them water, have them meet key members of your team, let them know that you're glad that they're there. Thank them for serving your clients and seniors in the industry. These are the types of things that will make a caregiver want to pick you. And focus that interview. I say this all the time. It's more about inviting them in and less about screening people out. So think about how you can go back critically, analyze your recruiting strategies here today, and adjust them accordingly to think about, we joke, but rolling out that red carpet for candidates when they come in and making them feel like you are the place that they would want to choose to build their career. So a couple things I want to tap into here, and then we'll open up our conversation here to some Q&A. I may have Ms. Marilee jump in on that. For some reason, I'm not able to view those questions. So I'll have Marilee jump in here in a minute and chime in on that. But In addition to our ongoing research into caregiver recruitment, we also have a suite of recruiting tools to help companies like you all source and hire those candidates. We're offering a unique level of exposure. So a lot of people ask us, how do candidates find you? We're a niche recruiting solution, and they're not necessarily getting connected to those companies themselves. So we're offering a unique level of exposure to candidates you likely aren't reaching today. So caregivers visit us for jobs, career fairs, career resources, free CEU training, research, scholarships. So this means that by working with us, you get to tap into professionals that are actively searching for those career resources as well. Now, if I've overwhelmed you with information today, that's not my intent, but we have a variety of tools, right? And today I talked about all the different things that you can take back to your teams and implement in your process. So if you want to do it yourself, we'll help arm you with that as well and what you need. We also have tools where we can plug in and help to streamline your recruiting process today. And we can build those tools out, build out that solution for you based on where you're at. So with all of our clients, we start with, what are your goals? Look at your cost per hire today. You can evaluate what tools would be most fruitful. So looking at internal time, looking at your bandwidth, and looking at your goals. So high level, we have traditional and automated recruiting solutions. As I've mentioned, there's no silver bullet to caregiver recruitment. You won't hear anybody over here at myCNAjobs say we're the only tool you should be using. We know those candidates are getting 3 or more calls every week for work. So it's important to utilize multiple channels and build out that multi-pronged approach to recruitment. Our job board and marketplace tools are built mainly for our home care clients. They help companies source candidates in real time and fill hard to recruit positions. They also extend your reach out to candidates that you can reach using our job board. But these tools tend to be mainly built for our home care. For both senior living and home care companies, we have 2 other tools. So first, we have our career fair solution called Caregivers on Demand. So with this tool, we're promoting and marketing a career fair on site at your office, at your community, help you craft that invite, do all the heavy lifting, and you can actually promote that event out to candidates you're likely not reaching today and make a lot of hires in a single day. So this is something a lot of our senior living clients and senior housing clients do to get a lot of people in and fill positions throughout their campuses as well. For both senior living and home care, we also have our interview booking solution. So with this tool, we're sourcing and pre-qualifying those candidates, and we're delivering them to your door. So we're filling an interview schedule at your office, at your community. This is providing a steady stream of candidates each week versus our career fair tool, which can help fill a lot of roles and drive a lot of candidates in a single day. So I appreciate everyone joining us here today. And we'll open it up here in just a second for Q&A. And I appreciate Marilee and the team at CoreCubed for including us in this important conversation. They're best in class at helping you from a branding perspective, a marketing perspective, your SEO, your social media management. There's so much that that companies can do there, and CoreCubed is a fantastic partner in that. We appreciate, if you're not working with us today, we value having a seat at the table, or at least a conversation. We tend to see the most success with companies where we partner with your recruiting team and your executives to go beyond job postings and resumes. So we've helped larger organizations, like some of you on the line, consolidate your recruitment, reduce your cost per hire, streamline that hiring process. And in the latest study of Home Care Pulse, we've ranked dollar for dollar for the 2nd year in a row as the #1 return on investment for senior care recruitment. I'm not saying we're a silver bullet, but we value the chance to have a conversation about how we can help. So to close out here before we open it up for some Q&A, we've got some good questions in here. I'm going to share my personal contact information. So I'm an executive over here, part of our executive team. I check my own email, and if you reach out, I promise I will get you to the right person on our team. So my email is maggie@myCNAjobs.com. My number here in Chicago is 312-506-4173. If you're sitting here struggling to staff cases or paying for short-term shift coverage, we can help. And I appreciate the opportunity to jump on the line here and talk with you today. So, Ms. Marilee, are you able to see the questions that people may have typed in? my GoToWebinar panel is not letting me do that.
I am, and I will read those to you. Let me just say one thing. Thank you, Maggie, very much for very good information. I just wanted to say one thing. The whole idea about caregivers choosing you, that is one of the areas where branding does come in, because that subliminal effect that your business has when people recognize you or when they feel comfortable with your brand is going to give you a little bit of heads up if you're actually trying to do your own recruitment, and probably would help with myCNAjobs as well. So, okay, the first question is, do you have any thoughts on using social channels for job recruitment? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, even Craigslist?
Yeah, that's awesome. So I would say we, historically, we would have said that most people don't necessarily, for caregivers, don't necessarily look at social media for jobs. This would have been a couple years ago. We tended to see that caregivers were looking at social media to learn more about your company. So that it was still important to have a Facebook page or Twitter, right, have some social media presence, but really more to talk about how do you praise your existing candidates, how do you treat your current team, what's kind of your culture like at your company. We seem to find that still remains true today. Most companies are not using social media as their main source for hiring, but they absolutely are starting to see more there. So Facebook Jobs is something that is relatively new in the space. That's something we're seeing pick up. I don't have enough data points to speak to it, but it's absolutely something in the space that we're seeing. There's some other interesting kind of job board things coming out here in the next few months that'll be interesting to see how social media plays a role there. I think referrals is a big role that social media can play. So for home care, senior living, regardless, some of your best caregivers come from your current best caregivers. And so building referral programs around that, a lot of that, if you're praising someone when, you appreciate Marilee bringing in Maggie, our newest, greatest caregiver, right? And praising that in a social, public way, that's a great way to use those channels. Craigslist is tough. It's not something that we generally recommend, but obviously Craigslist is now nationally paid tool, which historically it hasn't necessarily been. So I think that's weeded out a lot of the spammy jobs that were on there, but not all of them. So I can't speak to Craigslist necessarily, but I think social media is a great tool to use to build your brand, but build your brand for caregivers as well as clients looking for you as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
We have another question here. You had made a comment about screening the candidates less and how that might help more. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I like these questions are blind. They're coming in, Marilee, like we're on like the dating game or something. So yes, I can absolutely speak to that. So one of the tough parts is, we just talked about this a couple weeks ago at a conference actually. So yes, you want people coming in your door who are playing in the same ballpark, right? Who have the requirements that you need and what you're looking for. The tough part about that is you may be screening out some great candidates that once you get them in the door, you may be able to work with, to train, to build up. And I usually answer the question of, am I screening out too much, by asking the question of, are you hitting your hiring goals today? So most companies aren't hitting their hiring goals. Most companies, probably if you're joining us on the line today, it's because you're challenged by this. This is an area where you can open up your requirements, open up your screening, maybe invite some people in you may previously not have been. Now this isn't about background checking or drug screening or anything like that, but we're talking about historically maybe everyone had to have 2 years of experience. Now look at people having 1 year of experience, or maybe being a new grad, or someone who's a caregiver who's interested in getting trained to be a CNA. So just, I would think more critically about what you're screening on today, because likely what you're screening on today may have worked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Moving forward, when you think about the competition for those candidates, if those caregivers have multiple opportunities and you are the company who's creating more barriers for them to get in your front door, you're probably the interview that they're not going to show up for. So it's not necessarily about removing one filter versus another. It's more about, hey, can you open up your requirements? Can you open up your screening process and get people in the door who are a better fit? And again, none of these are silver bullets, but there are suggestions that we see agencies who may have been, or companies who may have been more strict a couple of years ago, that's a luxury. They're just not able to be that way anymore. So something to think about as well.
The next question is, do you see a prevalence of agencies holding, oops, excuse me, I just lost my screen, sorry. You can't see it, so you don't know that. Do you see a prevalence of agencies holding their own proprietary job fairs for caregivers?
Prevalence in them holding their own job fairs. So we hold thousands of job fairs for our clients across the country. So absolutely, that's one of our premium products, one of our premium offerings. It's something that we're seeing more and more companies doing. I would say in general, yes. Also through us, the answer is also yes. Companies historically may have attended a community-based job fair, like a local job fair where there's multiple companies. Our Caregiver On Demand tool, our career fair tool, is just for a company, and candidates can come in and learn about working just for that business and what they have to offer. It allows us and the company to promote their specific openings, their specific benefits and offerings, so they can come if that's the company they're interested in. So you tend to have higher intent individuals attend, and you're also able to kind of market that a little bit differently than getting lost amongst a couple of different companies at the same fair. We also we do tend to see that caregivers they trust us as a career resource. I talked originally about all the different ways that caregivers can come and interact with myCNAjobs beyond job boards and beyond career fairs. They're actually 65% more likely to attend an event if it's promoted by us than if it was promoted by the company itself. So we're kind of working with companies who we would endorse as well.
And you're probably doing a very branded, professional, thorough package when you're doing these job fairs, so that's got to be helpful, I would think.
Got it. Yeah, and it's kind of absolutely what you guys would be familiar with. Absolutely.
Here's another one. I'm in a market where caregivers can and do work for more than one and sometimes two home care companies at the same time. How do you position yourself from a recruitment perspective given this environment? Do you have any statistics on the value of ongoing training and certifications as a retention tool for caregivers? So 2 questions in one.
I love these questions. These are great questions, Riley. I wonder if you're planting them.
I'm not planting them. These are coming right.
You're not. They're so good.
Right out of our attendees. I love it.
I want to hit them. I know, and I can't see them, so they're just magically coming out of the air. So the first one. So asking. Will you say the first question for me again? So how do you differentiate yourself essentially in a market where caregivers are working for multiple agencies?
Yes. So how do you position yourself
from a
recruitment perspective?
Absolutely. So that is one of the biggest challenges right now. So not just that they're getting multiple phone calls, but just the fact that caregivers themselves have to work for more than one agency typically, or more than one, sometimes a community and an agency, and they have a job driving for Uber, or they have a job at the retail or fast food company. So they have to do that, especially with the new labor laws and overtime rules in effect and things like that. So we've seen a significant drastic change in that in the last, I'd say, 18 to 24 months. In terms of differentiating yourself, there's a lot of benefits out there that a lot of companies offer. So thinking about, is there anything unique that you can offer that an agency isn't offering? So something, a couple of benefits I'm seeing more of. I'm seeing more paid time off. I'm seeing more sick time as offerings that I've never seen before, particularly on the home care side. I think those are things that medical benefits, things like that senior living historically has always had more of, and it's been a challenge for home care to compete with that. I think fundamentally treating caregiving like a career and less like a job. So that can be things like reviews, that can be things like career development. This might go right into your second question around training. I think, again, got back from that conference this last weekend in Miami, and I think fundamentally one of the biggest things that I'm seeing more and more companies do is either building out their own schools, their own training. They're becoming certified to train for that CNA or HHA license. It's the best way to get those candidates where you need them to be from a training perspective. So I would absolutely say that, yes, I'm seeing more companies doing that. I would recommend that, figuring out, or partner with some great training organizations or a great school in your area. Think about that. But unfortunately, we don't have enough caregivers, so we are going to have to create them. Absolutely. Does that answer the two questions, Marilee?
I think it does. Except for statistics, are there any? There may not be on the value of offering training and certification as a retention tool.
You know, I was just talking to Dee Armstrong, is over at Home Care Pulse, and he and I read a show a couple of weeks ago, and he's fantastic. And he was saying that I think they do have some data from a home care perspective around that. Fundamentally, the data supports that investing in training your caregivers, I would say, almost always pays off. I can't think of a time when it wouldn't. I think of a scenario where it wouldn't, other than you training a candidate and that candidate going and getting a job somewhere else. But that's going to happen regardless. So if you kind of take that as a sunk cost at the beginning of considering a training program, then I would say that there's almost no downside. That you're making the investment, you're able to market that you're making the investment in caregivers. I don't have statistics around it. Home Care Pulse may, probably worth reaching out to them, but I can't think of a stat that wouldn't support training your caregivers as a positive thing for your organization.
Correct. I believe you answered this question, and this is our last question. What kinds of benefits are you seeing offered to caregivers? I think you answered that pretty thoroughly. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
We have a whole slew of them. We have a whole webinar just on this that we talk about sometimes. I would say, real quick, flexibility in shifts and schedules. Short commute times are a big thing. That paid time off or paid sick time. We see some unique things that people can do in their local community. So discounts on cell phone providers, Netflix subscriptions, things like that. One thing I think a lot of home care agencies I'm seeing do this more. I think senior living, there's some senior living companies that do this nationally. It's actually discounted access for service for caregivers' own family members. So discounted home care services or discounted senior living services. I think that's really interesting. I'm trying to think what else we see on there. There's bonuses, sign-on bonuses, there's referral bonuses, things like that. The biggest thing about bonuses that we see is less about how much you're paying and more about immediacy of payment. So paying early is better than paying more later. So paying less now is better than paying more later. So think about that as you're building out your referral programs and things like that as well.
Just two more came in, but they're pretty much the same, and I think you just answered them. Non-monetary benefits that are important to caregivers, and I believe you gave some of those.
Yeah, so the commute time is a big thing that caregivers say, flexibility in shifts and schedules, so being able to work with a candidate around the fact that they probably have to work for somebody else too to pay their bills. I'm trying to think what else we have from a non-monetary perspective. We see reviews, so like employment reviews, people feeling like they're a part of a larger team. So that ongoing training is something that's fantastic, offering that, ways to build in mentoring programs or places where caregivers feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And that's, home care is particularly isolating in a different way than senior living is. So that's something I highly recommend if you don't have those types of programs in place on the home care side. You absolutely should.
I think another non-monetary, and you touched on this, benefit is you mentioned feeling a part of the team, but I think it's so important for the caregivers to feel respect and to feel a part of the team and to feel like they are making a difference. So
absolutely, absolutely. And that can be praising them on social media, that can be sending a thank you card, it can be a call out in a newsletter. There's lots of ways to do that aren't just about a gift card to something or anything like that, because again, that's treating this like a career and not just like a job.
Maggie, absolutely excellent information. We have kept the attention of our audience the entire time, which is wonderful. Thank you so much for this, and thank you, attendees. We did record this, as I said, so we will post it on corecubed.com/events on our events page as soon as I can get it uploaded, and so you may share it pass it along, have other people come listen to it. And Maggie, have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much for your time today and for your expertise.
Wonderful. Have a good rest of your week. Take care.
Bye.